Well, brothers are at war in Ethiopia, and bloodshed and destruction of lives and properties is still ongoing on a large scale. Many are asking, why would Africans take up arms against each other? Since November 2020, Ethiopia's northernmost region, Desna or Tigray, has been at war with the national government led by the former Nobel Peace Prize winner Abiy Ahmed. Now, thousands of lives have been lost, and many more are displaced in the country. Densely populated and vast, Ethiopia's ethnic diversity threatens the peaceful coexistence of its people, but politics is at the center of its troubles. The UN and Ethiopia have traded accusations as Tigray says it's ready for peaceful resolution. But with the Ethiopian government sticking to its guns and seeking more before it settles for peace, an end to the war, until now, has become a wish. The United States has sent word in. The UN has expressed its displeasure with recent events in Ethiopia, and Africa's second biggest population is on the precipice. Eritrea is also in the conversation, and it's a heavy zone in Tigray. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. A recent report by the UN's Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia has accused the Ethiopian National Defense Force of committing large-scale killings. The Commission said Ethiopian soldiers have targeted Tigrayan men and boys of fighting age. It also accused Ethiopia of using starvation as a weapon of war. Tigray, controlled by the Tigray People's Liberation Force, coping with the ruins of war with its national authorities, has supported findings of the Ethiopian government. The fighting, which is in its 20th month, has seen bloodshed from both parties, and the UN says human rights violations have been observed from Ethiopia and Tigray. Rape has also been mentioned as a weapon of war used by soldiers during the war. The Ethiopian government has since rejected the allegations and described them as mockery. Now, after a 5-month truce, which saw a semblance of life return to Tigray, fighting has resumed, and the stakes seem higher as Eritrea is also fighting against the Tigrayan people. Maebel, Gebremedhin, co-founder and president of Tigray Action Committee, and Seyoum, Berhe, member, Tigray Diaspora Council, join me now on the show. Thanks and for your time. Let's start with you, Maebel. There was a truce, and there was this happiness amongst Africans who thought this was over and done with, looking towards a healing process. How did these talks break down all of a sudden?
What is going on in Ethiopia, in Tigray specifically, is not new. It has been going on for 2 years now. So what the government of Ethiopia and Eritrea together has done something shocking to your African listeners. It smacks on the face of Pan-African mentality. What the Prime Minister, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, goes and invites another country to basically destroy part of his own country. So while the fighting stopped a little bit, but fighting includes, he is conducting hunger as a war a means, and therefore the Tigrayans have no electricity, have no communication, have no food. Therefore, the war has continued except the shooting. Now, why did the shooting start? We are told once they have felt the Tigrayan military was at the weakest because they have stopped the food and no medicine, they felt they can destroy it immediately. So basically it was taking advantage of what they thought was a weak spot in the Tigrayan force. They forgot this is a survival war. This is not necessarily a military with another military. This is people who are afraid they will be totally destroyed, and therefore they're going to fight tooth and nail for everything they have to survive. So the Ethiopian government and the Eritrean government never wanted peace. They wanted to destroy not only the ruling party, which is their propaganda, they want to disseminate the Tigrayan people. How do I know that? His advisors have actually talked about totally erasing the people of Tigray, not only physically, but from the books of history. This is very scary. And for an African country, inviting another country to destroy his own people, it is simply disturbing, I have to admit. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Seyoum. And let me come back to Maebel. It's almost getting impossible on the continent to have authorities, I mean, representatives of the Ethiopian government to comment and speak on these issues, especially in the media. So we'd like to appreciate your time for also coming. Maebel, rape has also been mentioned as a weapon of war by soldiers, during this war, which is very disturbing for especially women and concerned, Africans. Now, help us make sense of what the authorities should do to ensuring that people are protected at the moment.
Well, I think the first thing to do to make sure that Tigrayans and people in general are protected is to allow Tigrayans basic necessities. One of those would be allowing hospitals to actually have things to take care of them. And so when these women have been raped, children have been raped, children as young as 4, and this includes boys as well, it's not just women, and women as old as 80 were raped. And they were raped by their federal soldiers, they were raped by Eritrean soldiers. It's been one of the worst parts of this genocide has been what's been happening to the bodies of women in Tigray by their own federal government. And so one way to make sure that they are protected is to allow them basic necessities, allow them to go to the hospital, allow the hospitals to actually have the materials they need to make them better, give them medicine, allow medicine to come in. Many countries have tried to send in aid. It's been blocked. It's been blocked for a very long time. And how do you protect someone when you can't even take care of them from the beginning? I think the Ethiopian people overall, not just in Tigray, should be frightened of the federal government. They have done some horrible things in Tigray, and if they could do that to their citizens there, they can do it to citizens everywhere, which they have been doing. They've been doing horrible things in Oromia, they've been doing horrible things in Somali, throughout Ethiopia. And so if I were to speak to an Ethiopian or just an African in general, I would say...
Let me jump in here, Maebel. Apologies. Let me jump in here quickly because we've seen concerns by Tigrayans talking about the blockade, which you highlighted. Let us in on situation at the moment. Has the blockade been lifted, especially for women and children who need medical? No,
not at all. Nothing has been changed. In fact, what's been happening as of this week is that hospitals have been bombed, playgrounds have been bombed this month. It's very, very dangerous to be a Tigrayan in Ethiopia. It's one of the worst places for us to currently be. Ethiopians have been attacking Tigrayans throughout the world, but specifically in Tigray, there's no safe space for them.
So how are these people, looked after? What's the Tigrayans doing to ensuring that these people who need Medicaid and especially food supply are being, taken care of?
Yeah, well, the doctors have been going without pay since the beginning of the siege, which again was last year, June 28th. They have been surviving with everyone else, doing all that they can. They've been reusing gloves. They've been cutting cloth to make bandages. They have been very resourceful. And so that's how they've been able to take care of each other. They've used expired medicine. Right now, our people are dealing with a genocide, a full-on genocide from top to bottom. There's no question about it. In fact, the report that came out this week states that this is essentially a genocide. There's really very little question. And so in the midst of that, they have been incredibly resourceful. When the Ethiopian government has allowed aid to trickle in, and literally trickle, very, very, very minimal, people have been able to survive off of that, but it's been very little. And so I'm impressed, amazed by our people in Tigray because they've been very resourceful in being able to survive in a situation that you would not even imagine could be something that you could survive in. Tigrayans have been able to essentially work a black market to get some aid in since there's no other way. And that's also been very, very minimal and very dangerous. We've lost a lot of people through that too. We are talking about 500,000 people have been murdered in Tigray, 500,000, and that is the low estimate. When we speak about rape and gender-based violence, we're speaking of tens of thousands. Right now, there's an estimate of 22,000 on the low side of women that have been raped, and that's just women. And again, on the low side, very conservative numbers. So what's happening in Tigray is terrifying.
As terrifying as that is, Seyoum, it breaks the heart of any, peace lover to see that this is happening in Ethiopia. You reminded us of the Nobel winner who's presently the president of Ethiopia. And by the way, the AU envoy, led by former President Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria, was rejected by the TPLF. But they accepted an AU intervention. Seyoum, what happened in previous discussions?
Well, I appreciate that. That's a great question. And it shows you the flexibility of Tigray leadership. The rejection of our old elder statesman was not about him. It was the relationship he has developed with Prime Minister Abiy, and there were some real concern. And yet, they also had some concern over African Union, because when Abiy invaded, he called it police work. You don't go with helicopters, drones, air force, and tanks to keep police work. He did, and African Union basically agreed with him. You see, with these two concerns as they are, the Tigrayan leadership, for the sake of peace, specifically for Tigrayan people, but also for the whole Ethiopia, they accepted the leadership of Obasanjo. They also accepted African Union leadership. And yet, Ethiopia, that never expected the flexibility like this, basically were shocked. And they said, well, we have to just find a way to get away, because they were never for peace. So ultimately, my friend, the Tigrayan leadership accepted Obasanjo's leadership, African Union leadership, as long as they bring experts and international powerful nations who can guarantee that. So they were extremely reasonable. And then the Ethiopian government could not sign this in Djibouti, even though verbally they agreed, according to the US representative, and then they disappeared. What happens then? They start bombing drones into schools, into clinics, hospitals. I want to mention one thing for your listeners, my personal. I have not spoken to my mother, who is 89, for 2 years. This is what's happening in Tigray. No communication, because they don't want the truth to go around. They don't want journalists like you to visit Tigray. They would never allow you. I just want to pinpoint that.
And it's quite instructive that you've been able to clarify the issue that it's not on the person of Obasanjo, but because of his alliance with, Mr. Abiy Ahmed. Now, still with you, Seyoum, the government of Abiy Ahmed was never supported by the TPLF. How have both parties, till date, managed their political differences?
Well, the surprising thing is, while the EPRDF that included the party members of the Prime Minister today, when they eliminated TPLF out of that circle, they invited TPLF to join them. TPLF said, we're not going to join your party, that's all. And then they left the federal government totally. And they said, we will manage our people that we have ignored for too long. Therefore, they did not want the federal power. But Abiy want to make sure, because he was really nervous of these former party members in some of them were his bosses. He went to Tigray. I'll give you a sense of the joy the Tigrayan people received and accepted him. They accepted him with euphoria. They had no problem of change of the power within the federal government. And yet, with all this goodwill that Tigrayan people have showed him, he says he wants to destroy TPLF. This is not about TPLF. The ones being raped are not TPLF, old women. I'm a Catholic. Catholic nuns were raped. Old women were raped. Kids, children were raped. A mosque was destroyed and a monastery was destroyed. These are not TPLF, but he uses this as a boogeyman to tell the world, and mainly Africans who have an image of Ethiopia in such a phenomenal level. He uses that saying TPLF is trying to destroy Ethiopia. TPLF, 27 years, we know where they brought Ethiopia from where to where. So the Tigray people is where he's really having a problem, but it's really difficult for me to define his hateful behavior with the people of Tigray. But again, as my sister said, he's doing similar, not to the same level, with the Oromos. He's doing similar in every ethnic group. His goal is power. For him, it is alpha and omega. It's not politics. Because the Tigrayan leadership invited him, they said, look, no matter what we do, we would have to come around the table. That's what their first statement. He doesn't want to because now he and his clique are criminals around the world. And if they make peace, you know what's going to happen. So obviously they cannot make peace.
Let me take off where you left off, talking about coming together around the table. Maebel, help us make sense here. It is hoped that the table is not broken yet. We still have a table so that we can have this conversation. As important as this is, it breaks the heart of every African to see that women and children are big casualties in this. Maebel, can both parties permanently unite and find a final unity on what's been going on?
Well, I'd like to quote the speech we just heard. It was a beautiful one where he said, "Build back better from the bottom." And so I would assume that every table in existence is able to be built back better, hopefully better, but it would have to start from the bottom. There is no way that we would be able to just jump into unity once we've experienced these atrocities. Tigray, you can't unify with someone that hates you so much. And so there would have to be a lot of acceptance and accountability done. Justice would have to be served. A lot of conversations would have to be done. I'd like to just reiterate what Seyoum was saying. Politics are not done this way. If this was a problem with a political party, this is not how you do it. You don't commit genocide against a minority group.
So you think, do you really think this is genocide, right?
1000%, without question. I'd also like to make this a personal thing. My 99 to 98% of my family is trapped in Tigray, including my father. So this affects me directly. This is 1000% a genocide, without question.
And if that is, and this is to you, Seyoum, if that is what it is, how difficult is it for the AU to understand that there is such a thing as systematic, cleansing of a group or into their nationality or ethnic affiliation?
And I do have some friends at AU, so it is really painful. I have some really good friends in there. And yet, I think African Union failed miserably at saving 500,000 Tigrayans and ongoing. They failed it. They failed it partly. AU is in Addis Ababa, as you know. And Ethiopia as a nation hosts African Union. But you see, where we're having real issue is when we talk about a nation. Are we talking about the mountains and rivers and land or the people? African Union as an institution for all of us should have looked at the massacre that was taking place against Africans. And they paid attention to the entity called Ethiopia rather than the Ethiopian people. Could we ever say in Germany, let's not shake the boat. Let the 6 million Jews get killed for the sake of Germany. Could we say that in Rwanda? It's okay if the 800,000 Tutsis die for the sake of Rwanda. Could we say that? No. Why should we say this again, even though we said never again? So the African Union failed at the first step. The second step they failed is right now, when the Tigrayan leadership have accepted African Union's leadership and the respect for our elder leader from Nigeria, the African Union should have come to the Ethiopian leaders and say, you know, get hold of your brain here. Why are you bringing the North Korea of Africa, Eritrea, a large prison for me, it's not a nation, it's a large prison of Eritreans, to come and massacre the people of your own country? Why is African Union so quiet on this massacre? It's a mystery, my friend. I cannot explain it. It's disappointing, really.
And
Can I say-
go ahead, Maebel.
Yeah, you asked how would the AU be able to essentially understand that this is a genocide. But I'd like to remind Africans, we have experienced multiple genocides throughout African history. This is not something new necessarily, but this is an opportunity for the AU to not only stop it, but to show the entire world that Africans are more than this. This is not something that we're going to accept as Africans, as Black people. We will no longer allow governments to come and just kill their people for the sake of whatever they feel is important. It's not okay. We are Africans at the end of the day. Tigrayans are Africans, and the AU should be standing up for African people.
Let me quickly state this again to our viewers, that all efforts to get representatives of the Ethiopian government to come sit the side of this story on this burning issue is still very unsuccessful. We're hoping to do that. But quickly, Seyoum, you know, the government of Isaias Afwerki in Eritrea has also been accused of joining the war against Tigray. Now, considering the history of animosity between the TPLF and Eritrea, do you think this is purely political in this?
I want to take you a little bit further, if I may. The TPLF and EPLF of Eritrea worked together hand in hand trying to defeat the communist government in Ethiopia. The fighters from both sides are buried in the same burial in many places. So at one point, they were the best of friends. Let's make that clear. And then TPLF worked really hard to the fulfillment of the Eritrean people who wanted to be separated from Ethiopia. It was their right. TPLF supported it. Now, the Eritrean leaders' hate and resentment of TPLF leadership, or should I say Tigrayans, is really overall. He wants to be the leader in the Horn of Africa. But remember, Eritrea have fought with how many? Yemen, Sudan, Djibouti, the 600,000 people who live in a small place. He actually went to war with Djibouti and with Ethiopia. He got a bad habit. So it is not political. Abiy and Isaias have a design that we don't quite understand. And that design in their mind, it seems, cannot take place unless they eliminate the Tigrayan power, the Tigrayan leadership, as well as the Tigrayan elite and the people. So, by the way, historically, you would not find the difference between a Tigrayan and Eritrean. These are the facts, we like it or not. And yet, they speak the same language, mostly. They have very similar, the same culture and religion. And yet, that design cannot be fulfilled while you have a strong Tigray leadership.
And before I go to Maebel, before I go to Maebel, now help us here. So what's the role of the Amhara in this war?
The Amhara were used by Abiy and their own interest. And this is extremely important. In the beginning, there were certain conflicts with Amhara leadership wanting to hold on to certain parts of Tigray, Western Tigray. Let me also stress, that is the part that connects Tigray with Sudan. The design to isolate and circle Tigray cannot happen unless you take Western Tigray away. Now, who owns Western Tigray right now? The Amharas. Except pay attention to what's happening to Amhara now. In the beginning, Abiy Amhara were hand and gloves. They work together. The rape, by the way, this is not my word. The UN human rights. The rape happened by the Amhara soldiers, the Ethiopian federal soldiers, and the Eritrean soldiers. Okay. So the Amharas now are being hit by Abiy left and right, because they have fulfilled part of his mission to isolate the Tigrayans and weaken them. So now the Amharas in a very difficult position. On one hand, they want to keep the Western Tigray for themselves, but more so for the federal government, where Tigray will not have any connection with any foreign country except Eritrea and Ethiopia, where they have circled them, and they will not allow, and a leader is responsible to feed his country. Well, this leader will not allow the world to feed the people of Tigray. So there are reasons. Both of them are in the same camp, but it's beginning to fall apart. As you know, Achebe brilliantly put, things fall apart. Thank you.
And Maebel, the Ethiopian government has largely blocked foreign interventions in the war, and not just Medicaid, as highlighted by you earlier. What do you think the situation, why do you think the situation has lasted this long?
Survival. I think what is going on is, as you know...
Apologies, Seyoum. I wanted Maebel to go...
Oh, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
No problem at all. I think your question specifically was, why is this going on? And it's due to the lack of ability for people to get into Tigray. Journalists are not allowed. One of the first things that Abiy did was stop journalists from coming in. He turned off the internet. We've had issues where people have asked, how can we know if this is real if there are no pictures? Well, how do we get pictures if a journalist can't come in? You know, and so he's been able to really do a lot in the dark. Luckily for us, we've been able to get stories out through the refugees that have escaped out of Tigray very early on. Originally, when this first happened, 60 to 70,000 Tigrayans were able to leave and go into Sudan, and they were able to share their stories. As soon as those stories started to get out, Abiy closed the border and has, what Seyoum was mentioning earlier, completely closed off Western Tigray. And Western Tigray has become one of the worst areas in Tigray, where there have been concentration camps, where people are being mutilated. It's just horrific scenes are happening in Western Tigray right now. And we know that through the refugees. And so this will continue to go on until either the Tigrayan TDF, Tigrayan Defense Forces, is able to regain enough traction and save our people, or the West actually steps up and stops them. And so it's either or for us, as mentioned before by Seyoum. This is literally a do or die. We don't have any options at this point. We haven't been able to get any assistance at all. And so if we continue to not get any assistance, we're going to have to continue fighting. We don't have an option. If you are going to keep hitting me, I have to protect myself, right? And so those are the current options that we have, and that's the way it's going to be until either the West takes some serious action in stopping it themselves, or we do.
And Seyoum, before we go, we understand that we've actually seen pockets of these controversies spill to Ethiopian nationals in the diaspora, which is not too good a thing. How much of an impact has this war had on the country as a whole?
Unfortunately, a lot. I think for the Tigrayans, from what I can read, there is not only disappointment, but real resentment of our brothers and sisters on other parts of the country do not seem to accept, understand, or support. They will always ask, how do you know that 20,000 or so women were raped? How do you know 500,000? They forget that these are our families. These are our brothers and sisters. And instead of saying, wait a minute, this guy to go because he's going to do this everywhere, a lot of them are publicly supporting a genocider. We cannot understand that. We really cannot. And they go back to how the war started. It doesn't matter how the war started. Right now, the Ethiopians should not allow an Ethiopian leader to be a genocider, to copy Hitler in his work. It is simply not reasonable. So yeah, there is a resentment. We just are shocked, and there is a real deep disappointment. Tigrayans have only one choice. They have to survive. The rest of Ethiopians have a lot of choices. They can stop killing us. They can basically be peaceful and stay in their place. We would be okay. But for us, you know, either flee, freeze, or fight. We chose to fight back because we are going to be killed if we don't. That is what the Ethiopian public does not seem to understand. And partly what my sister touched on, there is no media. How heck are they going to understand? Because he blocked everything. So the Ethiopians are in the dark about Tigray, and the resentment is very heavy. And unfortunately, we have to learn to live together. Together, I don't mean in Ethiopia. That's the choice of the people of Tigray. I'm an American. I cannot make that decision for Tigrayans. But the Tigrayan people have to make that choice in the future.
Okay, Seyoum, I think this is where we anchor it for today, but we'll love to stay on this, and we still are extending invitation to the Ethiopian government and its representatives to be on the show. But in all of this, Africa is hoping that peace returns to the entire Ethiopia as a country. I'd like to thank you for your time, for being such nice company, Maebel, Gebremedhin, and Seyoum, Berhe. And well, for those who missed out on the show, you can get to watch us pretty much later on YouTube. Keep in mind, you can also catch the Kenyan president's comment at the 77 UN General Assembly, William Ruto, on our website, newscentral.africa. I'm Sulaiman. Thanks for watching.